Okay, so fonts. How do you use fonts effectively on your book cover? There's a bunch of different ways to do this. You can pick one main font and then have a secondary font, but you need to make sure that secondary font matches with the main font. What do I mean by this? It's a little bit difficult to explain, but if you mix and match different fonts, you're going to see that some fonts look better together and other fonts don't look as good. If you go online, you can even find some fonts. Let's try and see if we can find some fonts that match together. There we go. Even if you find a font that you're going to use for your title and it looks really, really good, you can even put that font in. Let's say we're going to use Futura. Fonts that match with Futura. Futura is a font. And there we go, font pairing. It's going to give you a bunch of other fonts that you can try. So let's look at this book cover, for example. Let's see what fonts they use. And I think this is a custom-made font. What's a custom-made font? So a custom-made font is basically just a font that already exists, but then you can manipulate it a little bit to make it more unique. Or you can just make your font from scratch. Now, if you're a new publisher, you're probably not going to pay someone to create a custom font for you. You're probably just going to find a font that's already out there. And that's good enough. But this cover used a custom font. I believe it's a custom font. Now, can you see how for the H, it has this little curve thing here, this thing here, it has this curve thing here? That's custom, because when you go and type in for a font, most likely it won't have these weird curvy things. You get me? Usually you have to do it yourself, but some fonts do have it. But the most important part about selecting your font is about making it match your main image, making it match your theme, making it match your whole book cover. Now, this book cover is about dinosaurs. It's a dinosaur book for kids. So the designer has to pick a font that screams dinosaur, that makes you feel like you're in the dinosaur ages. And they did a great job with this font, because this font looks a little bit prehistoric, and the little pointy parts on the font looks like dinosaur claws. Again, it gives you that feeling of dinosaur, especially when you match it with the dinosaur and everything else. Now, another thing they did with the font is they added little dinosaur eggs instead of the letter O. So instead of how, they put H, W, and then the O is an egg. I like to do this with my book covers as well. Add one little element where it replaces the text, and that makes your book cover look so much more professional. Now, you can do this with a bunch of different titles. It all depends on what your book is about, your niche, and all of that. So they pick the font, they put little elements in the title. So maybe if you were doing a book about umbrellas, in the title you can replace one of the letters with an umbrella or with an umbrella stick. Or maybe if it was a T, instead of a T you can have an open umbrella. But either way, you can experiment and find what works and what doesn't work. Now, they didn't just use one font. In fact, they used two fonts. The second font they use is this, and they only used it for the word dinosaur. Why do you think they only used it for the word dinosaur? Because that is the main theme of the book, and that's probably what people are searching for as well. Now, this book is extremely popular, so people will be searching how to catch a dinosaur because it's a famous book. But even if they didn't know the title of the book, they're going to type in dinosaur book for kids, whatever they're going to type in. Whatever they type in is going to have the word dinosaur in, which is why the designer chose dinosaur as a word that's going to stand out in the book cover. And in order to make it stand out even more, they picked a different font. Now, this font looks prehistoric. It looks like the Flintstones font. It looks like it's made out of stone. They picked a thicker font. So can you see how this is a thin? So some of it's thin, other parts are curvy, and it's pointy. But the dinosaur one is completely different. It's not pointy at all. It's actually curved or rounded. It's thick. So it's completely different. Because of that opposition, it makes it stand out. So this cover did a brilliant job at picking fonts that work well together, and also using elements inside the book title that work well with the font. Let's look at another book cover. Now, this book cover that we're going to look at is the exact same niche, exact same target audience. Again, it's a dinosaur book for kids. But look at how different the fonts are to give you a different feeling. This gives you a certain feeling. I can't describe what feeling it gives you, but just by reading this font, it gives you a certain feeling, like excitement maybe. But then when you look at this dinosaur book, it's the same book. It's still a dinosaur book for kids, probably targets the same age range, but look at the font that they used. They didn't use the big blocky stone dinosaur font. Instead, they used this curvy, sophisticated, almost sparkly font. Now look at the D on dinosaur. Look at how this curves all the way around. That's completely different from the D here. This is more blocky. This is more curved. But again, they used font that matches with the image, because look at all the sparkly things around in the image, and the dinosaurs are nice and cute. It seems like a very down-to-earth chill book to read, which they needed to represent that with the font, which is why they chose this font, a nice curvier font, a more friendlier font, and they added some sparkly textures and everything to make it even better. Let's look at some other fonts and see how they use fonts effectively. So this is something completely different. This is a fun book for couples. So there's games and things inside. Now, they could have made fun book the exact same font as the Ultimate and Couples. So this is a nice thin sans serif font. So fun book isn't in the same font as couple. Why is that? Because the word fun shows that it's fun and energetic and all positive emotions. So they wanted to use a font that represents positive emotions, which is why they went for a more graffiti brush kind of font. And it works well together, because the way you read it is the Ultimate Fun book for couples. That font gives you a different way of reading it. Your mind will read it in a different way depending on the font. So this is a very nice font that they use. If they used a more serious font, it wouldn't look as good. It wouldn't look fun anymore. Let's take a look at another one. Our bucket list for couples. Now these guys decided to use a very thick font. Thick but nice and curved, rounded and friendly font. Same applies for the subtitle and the title. They both use nice and curved fonts. They didn't use any serif font because that's more serious. But they wanted this to be a more fun book, which is why they used a curvy font, a thicker font, a font that stands out. Let's take a look at another one. There we go. So this is basically for the same people. Again, it's for couples. This is for marriage. And these guys did the same thing that the dinosaur cover did. They added an element inside of their title that works well with the font. Now this looks really, really good. But guess what? These other two book couples, they use sans serif fonts. And it looks all nice and light-hearted and fun. Now another thing they did is they didn't use a sans serif font. They didn't use a friendly font. They used a completely different font. They used a serif font. And we can tell that it's a serif font because look at all these little pointy bits. That's what makes this a serif font. Now these little pointy bits make it seem more sophisticated, more serious. And that's exactly what they're going for. Why do they want it to be so serious and so sophisticated? Well, because this is a book about marriage and it's a guy with a PhD. So a guy with a PhD is supposed to trust them. They know what they're talking about. So they would rather use a serif font on their covers because they're going for a more serious, a more professional book cover. They want a trustworthy book cover. They want you to see this and be like, oh, you know what? Yeah, this looks like a serious professional book. Now imagine if this guy, John M. Gottman, he has got a PhD and he's telling you how to fix your marriage, but the cover looks like this. You won't take it as seriously because the font is big and fat and fun, but this font is more thin, sophisticated, elegant. So you can take this book more seriously. So you can use serif fonts like this guy. You can use sans serif fonts like this guy. If you go for a more fun look, you can mix and match the fonts. So here they have a serif font, which is blocky and straight and organized. And then they also have another serif font, which is more like a brush feeling. And by mixing those two together, it looks good. You can even add little elements like the dinosaur cover did with their book title. As long as the little elements match with the font, that would be great. And again, you can mix and match different fonts to see what works better, what looks good. And try adding some texture to your fonts. So this just could have been yellow, but it wouldn't have looked as good. But as soon as they added these little sparkly effects, then it matches with the cover. So make sure your font matches with your main image. Make sure you either pick a serif font if you're going for a more serious look, a sans serif font if you're going for a more fun look, and make sure you add textures to make it stand out even more, just like the dinosaur one did here as well. Added little stone textures. That's what make this look so good. So yeah, I hope this was helpful, and let's get on to the next one.